Here's an introduction to analyzing jazz lead sheets. We'll be using Roman numerals, but before that, we'll be using a series of analytic symbols. A curved arrow like this, indicating a dominant resolution. On this side, we have a dominant structure chord. On this side, we have any chord whose root is a fifth below this chord. We have a dotted arrow. On this side, we have a dominant structure chord, and on this side, we have any kind of chord that's just down a half step from this chord. Here we have a bracket. This indicates a 2-5. On this side, we have a minor 7 chord. On this, or possibly a half diminished chord. On this side, we have a dominant structure chord, a fourth above, fifth below. Finally, my own symbol, a curved arrow like this in parentheses with some kind of explanation, either that a subdominant minor resolution has occurred or that a sharp 2 diminished 7 resolution has occurred. Let's take a look at some lead sheets. You're going to do your analysis of this in 2 stages. On the first stage, you're going to go through and just apply the analytic symbols wherever you can. I'll go through first and put in a bracket on all the 2-5s. This one was a little sloppy. Now I'm going to indicate all the dominant resolutions. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go, 5-7 of 2. Here we go. Here we go, and don't forget going back to the top. Here we go, the C7 resolving back to F. Now, this is the first stage of analysis, or maybe even we won't call it analysis, just kind of like looking what's going on. Now I'm going to add a new symbol, the arrow in parentheses, because here we have a subdominant resolution. Flat 7-7, E flat 7, resolving up a whole step back to 1. So I'll write down SDM for subdominant minor resolution. At this point, we're ready to add in Roman numerals. The idea is that this written analysis is like a scaffolding, so that if we do this properly, once we write down everything that we're going to write down, you could go and erase all the chord symbols, and then you could go back and recreate it in whatever key you would want. So, we have a 1 chord here, we have a 1 chord here, a 2 chord here. These chords don't need to be indicated because these symbols are tying them to this structurally important 4 chord. 1, 2. Now at this stage, I'm going to take this bracket here and enlarge it to include the 2 chord in this bar. So the bottom line here is that this 3-6-2-5-1 progression is only reflected on the page with a Roman numeral 1. This dominant chord, this D7, doesn't have to be identified at all because it resolves to the 2 chord here, which is part of a bracketed 2-5, which resolves back to 1. At this stage, analysis can really begin. You can look at this and say it's a 12-bar blues. You can say that one of its characteristics is that it uses the 2 chord as kind of like a little passing tone chord, and that otherwise it makes extensive use of 2-5s that are linked in various ways. Let's take a look at a different kind of jazz standard, All of Me. This is one where when we go through it at the first time, we notice that there are all kinds of extended dominant resolutions. The E7 to the A7, the A7 to the D minor, the E7 to the A. Here we have what's called an interpolated 2/5 in that it kind of interrupts this resolution, but we would draw an arrow from the D7 over that to the G7, going back to the top. At this point, we really should notice that these 8 bars are the same as these 8 bars. So you might reflect that in your analysis by essentially leaving it blank. Here we have kind of a very unusual 2/5 because the 2 is almost always on the strong beat and the 5 is on the weak beat. Here this is probably a chord symbol that really is not an E minor 7. It's really some kind of passing tone B in the bass. 2/5, 2/5. Dominant resolution, dominant resolution, dominant resolution. Here we have a 4 minor chord leading back to 1. I'll put an arrow and a parenthesis around it, and I'll write in SDM. At this point, I'm ready to put in my Roman numerals. 1, 2, 6, 4. What this analysis reveals is that this is a tune that's built around the use of secondary dominants to go to basically all the different diatonic centers in the key of C major, or in a major key. Here you're on the 2 chord, the 6, the 4. Really the only significant chord that you don't go to is the 5, but that's a classical thing and this is a jazz tune. So it kind of substitutes 4 as a point of emphasis instead of 5. This little diminished 7th chord here should not, or diminished chord, but it's probably a diminished 7th chord for sure. If C is the top note in the melody, that would make it a diminished 7th chord. This is what we might call a passing tone chord that goes down to 2. That's a detail that I'm not really covering yet in this introductory look.